Hello, I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally. And thanks for putting up all the photos of the batches of food. I always enjoy seeing that, and you guys are awesome about that. And that is a very shiny new slow cooker you've got, Michael, so rock on. Hopefully that will treat you as well as the other one has and serve you in good stead. The had a couple of questions out there. So Lee was asking about thunderstorms, and I have to say in the southeast, thunderstorms were like constant. So if you had a pet that had thunderstorm phobia, it was just not fun. And so we would our old dog Sam did, and so we would actually start him on, and Peps decided he needs to pay a visit. We would start him on fluoxetine about a month or so before the thunderstorm season would start. And that may sound like I'm going sideways on you guys, but here's the reason. We did everything, and many of you listed like all the options that I would tell my clients in practice, but he would still be absolutely panicked. And so with fluoxetine, it was okay. Now, where Lee is in Kansas, I think the storms are far fewer, but they are very intense. And I mean, they scared the bejeebers out of us a couple of times. So, you know, it's one of those things. I don't think you have them quite as often, and you have a little bit more warning as to when one is rolling up. But if you combine that with fireworks on 4th of July, then that's really kind of a recipe for a really horrible day for everybody. I mean, not only will patients be unhappy, but also Lee and her family. So there's a couple of options, which actually many of you mentioned already. So Thundershirt, the one thing I will say about that is if the dog has a pretty heavy coat, it will make them too hot if they're already anxious and panting. So you do have to be cautious about that. We would actually use one of those flexible gel packs kind of wrapped in between Sam and the Thundershirt, and that would help keep him a little bit cooler. And then the other thing is that with a Thundershirt, if it's not already storming and you're trying to preempt, we would put this on Sam and he would be like, "Oh my God, there's a storm coming," and start to freak out, even though we may have been using it for something else that caused him anxiety, like you know, a bunch of people coming on, or our neighbor shot like rounds of mortars. Literally, he was one of those folks that really enjoyed reloading and no kidding, built cannon mortar. So, you know, it was Sunday afternoon, so we'd put Sam's Thundershirt on and he would start freaking out even if our neighbor wasn't shooting. So be cognizant of that. So sometimes the things we end up doing set up visual and behavioral cues for our dogs that something bad is coming because we're doing that. So that whole idea about using pattern interrupts for dogs that have separation anxiety, meaning, you know, we all do things in a routine in order to get out the door with all of the stuff we're supposed to take, including our car keys and phones and our lunch and our cup of coffee to get to work. And so trying to do a pattern interrupt of that, like putting all that stuff together in the evening, or putting all that stuff together and walking out the door on the weekends and then walking back in, that's a pattern interrupt. So trying to kind of break up the steps that we do everything in, that can help with anxiety, even with thunderstorms. So Adaptil collars were awesome, Adaptil diffusers, spray, all of that good stuff. Lavender diffusing, I think it didn't work quite as well as I would have liked to, but I would often put a drop on my fingers and put it in behind the ear at an acupuncture point called Anshen. And what that would do is that point is used for calming in acupuncture, and so that would help reduce anxiety quite a bit as well. So there's other things, melatonin, as some folks mentioned, for a dog, 50 pounds and over 3 milligrams is going to be a good dose. There are various calming musics that are available. Benadryl is a great over-the-counter solution. So the thing to remember about Benadryl is that antihistamines are really closely related in structure to some of the drugs that we use to help reduce anxiety, the tricyclic antidepressants. So that may be helpful if you haven't tried it. And then, finally, then we're down to the prescription drugs. And don't let your vet give you just acepromazine. It is a sedative and not an anxiety reliever. And so what happens is you give your dogs ACE, they're chilled out, but really what's going on is they just can't move. And so the next time the thing that they fear happens, they are even more worked up about it and really likely to overcome the acepromazine. And so people would use that for, reducing, sedating dogs for nail trims, for instance. And invariably the second or third time, the dog would sort of wake up out of its slumber and then try to bite the crap out of us. So use it with something else like trazodone or fluoxetine or something like that. Valium is a reasonable alternative. Do try this for the first time on a clear, beautiful day, because some dogs do have reverse reactions. And so if you're finding this out in the midst of a thunderstorm, that's not going to go very well. Now, one of the other things that Jane mentioned, the liquid Nutricalm, is a tryptophan-based supplement, and that did work beautifully. So I would certainly encourage you to look into that, or just plain old tryptophan. It's been a really massive help, and we used it even for Pepe when we were starting to travel. So it can be used for dogs and cats, and yes, there are cats that have thunderstorm phobia. So, and then as I mentioned, if thunderstorms are a real massive problem like we had in the southeast, that's where something like fluoxetine or trazodone started before the thunderstorm season hits and combined with behavioral training. So the thunder CDs and things like that that are meant to help your pet not be so stimulated by those things, by the noises, that's an option. So hopefully that gets you enough information on thunderstorm phobia, and all is well. So, Lee, I hope that life is a little bit better for you and patients this 4th of July. The other question we had was Kathy was asking about her pets having constipation since starting on the crock pet diet, and that's unusual. So there's a couple of things you can try, and if the pumpkin is not working, you could try other things like chia seeds or psyllium husks, and start really, really low, again, with something like a 1/8 of a teaspoon and work your way up. The interesting thing is that for some pets and some people, increased fiber actually makes constipation worse. And so what you may find is that instead of adding fiber, you need to add more water and not add fiber, and then that will dilute the fiber out to some degree. If you find that that is more helpful, then what I would do is be a bit more selective about your veggies. And so what that means is you probably don't want to put cabbage and broccoli in there, but use leafy greens, more like kale, things of that nature that are going to be somewhat lower in fiber. And then also, beans are extremely high in fiber, so that may be the first place you start, is to either reduce in half the amount of beans that you're putting in, or take them out altogether. So, Kathy, let me know if that's helpful or not helpful, and let me see if I can get to where this screen is. I'm not seeing any questions up here. And that's kind of what I've got for you today. Mary, it's a really beautiful batch of food that you put up there. And then Bettina, really glad to hear that your dog, Mary, is getting her sutures out. And so hopefully you will get more good news, because gosh knows you guys could use it. And hopefully Mary is also starting to gain some weight back as well. Let's see, the other thing I can the other thing I can tell you is that Mike Daly and I are going to do a mobility masterclass on Friday, and we're going to do this online, obviously. So I have to go down to LA for a couple of meetings and things to take care of, and so we're going to hang out and do this masterclass for you. It'll be about an hour of instruction, and Mike's going to demonstrate some really simple techniques that you can use to help improve mobility, reduce inflammation and soreness and things of that nature, and get some blood flow going. And after the kind of the instructional part, then what we'll have is about 30 minutes for questions and answer. So I'll put the link down there. It's $20, so I think that's a fairly fair price, and we will be able to put that up in our members area so that the folks that have purchased it will have access to it for life, and so you'll be able to refer back to that. So that's what I know there, and that's what I've got for you today. If you all have any other questions, throw them up in the comments down below, and I will get to them next week. And until next week, remember, your pet's best health starts in the bowl. Many thanks.